I kissed a hot stranger, but I didn't know he was a Mafia heir. One kiss and everything changed, but I never thought the man behind that kiss would be my downfall, or my rising. I didn't go to the bar that night looking for anything but silence, a drink, a moment to breathe. That's what my usual seat at the far end of the counter was for, to disappear into the low hum of conversation, the clink of glasses, the kind of anonymity only a dimly lit bar could offer. But then, he was there, the new bartender. He moved behind the counter like he owned the place. His hair was dark, perfectly styled, sleeves rolled up just enough to tease strong and tattooed forearms. And once he turned to me, green eyes shined with interest. I felt the pull. "You're a whiskey guy," he came closer and said, like he already knew. I raised a brow. "Good guess." "Not a guess," he smirked, pouring the glass before I even confirmed. "You look like the type." "And what type is that?" He leaned in slightly, one hand resting on the counter, and his voice dropped just enough to make me feel the space between us shrink. "The lone wolf type," he said. "And the kind who doesn't like surprises." I almost laughed. I should have, but something about him made it impossible. "So, you're the new guy." I drank it up in one single sip. He shrugged. "I have more time in the house than you can think." "And why haven't I seen you around before?" I asked with a curvy smile. "What's the story, whiskey guy?" he asked, avoiding my question as he refilled my glass before I even asked. "No story," I said, swirling the amber liquid. He tilted his head like he didn't believe me. "Everyone's got a story." "I don't even know your name, though. Why should I tell you about my life?" He laughed slowly and huskily. "It's Alex." "Benjamin," I said back. "Ben." He smiled once more. "Pretty, just like you." I took another sip. "You're flirting with me?" He didn't even flinch. "Yeah." The night moved in slow turns after that. Every interaction, a careful play of push and that damn pull. Alex was so interesting. At one moment, he brushed his fingers against mine when he slid my fifth drink over, and his green eyes ate me alive. That's when he leaned in. No warning, no hesitation. His lips crashed into mine, and the heat that riled me up had nothing to do with the whiskey. The kiss was hungry, like neither of us had planned it, but both of us had been waiting for it. His hand gripped the edge of the counter, mine curled into his shirt, pulling him closer without thinking. The taste of my drink, his scent, clean, sharp, something expensive, flooded my senses. And just as fast as it happened, Alex pulled himself away. Smirking, he looked at me like he knew that he had turned my entire night inside out. "Do I see you outside in a few?" Alex asked, again with that superior essence of his. I nodded. "Enjoy your drink, whiskey guy," he murmured. I did enjoy the booze and also a lot of other things. I told myself I was coming back for the drinks, for the atmosphere, the familiarity, not for him. But the second I walked through the doors of the bar, my eyes found Alex like they were drawn by a magnet. He moved behind the counter with that effortless confidence, a faint smirk tugging at his lips, like he belonged here, like he ran the place, and maybe he did, in his own way. He glanced up and our eyes met. For a split second, I swore something flickered there, recognition, amusement, maybe even satisfaction. But then it was gone. He just smirked wider, tilting his head slightly. "Whiskey guy," he greeted, already reaching for the bottle. I huffed a laugh, sliding onto the bar stool. "That nickname's still sticking, huh? Till you give me a better one." I laughed now. "Sleeping with you wasn't enough?" His laughter joined mine. The first time we met, the conversation had been easy, sharp, teasing. That hadn't changed, but now there was something beneath it, the taste of wanting more. Maybe that's why I kept coming back, or maybe it was the way he looked at me sometimes, like he knew exactly what he was doing to me. Unfortunately, that night something was feeling off. I noticed them around my second drink. 3 men in dark suits near the back, standing too still, their eyes fixed on Alex. They weren't drinking, weren't talking, just watching. At first I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe they were waiting for someone, or just had that stiff, businessman kind of energy. but the longer I watched, the less it felt like a coincidence. It wasn't just how they stood, it was the control, the precision, like bodyguards or enforcers. And Alex, he was aware. Kinda stiff, but not bothered at all. And I knew without a doubt that whoever they weren't just passing through. I should have left it alone. Should have finished my drink, paid my tab, and told myself it wasn't my business. Instead, I stayed. Later that night, when the air inside the bar felt too thick, Alex was nowhere to be seen, and when my thoughts were spinning in directions I didn't like, I stepped outside. Time to go home and make this childish crush go away. The alley behind the bar was quiet, dimly lit by the flickering glow of a street lamp. I let out a slow breath, dragging my hand through my hair, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. Then I saw him. Alex stood near the curb, posture relaxed, his face half hidden in shadow. A sleek black car idled in front of him, engine humming low, headlights off. A man sat in the driver's seat. Another stood just outside, exchanging quiet words with Alex. Their conversation was too low to make out, but their body language was tight, purposeful. Then the man reached into his coat, and it took my breath away. I took an unconscious step forward, barely registering the crunch of gravel under my boot as something glinted in the dim light. A gun. And before I could convey, I saw Alex taking it. Smooth and unbothered, slipping it beneath his shirt like it was nothing. Like it was routine, like he'd done this before. I didn't move. He said something final to the man, then turned and started walking back towards the bar. I pressed myself against the alley wall, my pulse hammering. He passed close, so close I caught the faintest trace of his cologne. He didn't see me, didn't know I was watching. And as I stood there, my mind racing, my gut screaming at me that this was something I shouldn't ignore, something I should walk away from. Who were those guys? Who was Alex? I didn't have the answers for those, but I couldn't fight the pull that made me want him more and more even though I saw what I saw. I didn't go to the bar those nights. Instead, I went out with an old friend, and that's the first time Alex showed up outside my apartment. It was past midnight, I had a busy workday plus dinner. I was half asleep and fumbling with my keys when a voice cut through the quiet. "Didn't take you for the type to go to bed early." I turned, my pulse kicking up a notch, waking me up instantly. Alex leaned casually against the street lamp, hands in the pockets of his leather jacket, a smirk playing at his lips. For a second, I was too surprised to respond. "What the hell are you doing here?" He shrugged. "Happened to be nearby." Bullshit. But I didn't call him on it. I had mentioned my address once, and the truth was, even though I was confused about that scene, I wasn't mad at him. I didn't invite him upstairs, so we ended up walking. No destination, just empty streets and neon lights reflecting off rain-damp pavement. The city was quieter at this time. Alex walked close, not touching, but enough that I could feel the heat of him. We talked, but never about anything that mattered. He was good at keeping things light, always skirting around the edges of something deeper. When I asked about his past, he redirected. When I got too close, he flashed that lazy knowing grin and turned the conversation back on me. But I could see between it all the way something flickered in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking, the way his fingers twitched like he wanted to reach for me but wouldn't let himself. He was caged, and I was starting to realize I wanted to be the one to unlock whatever was keeping him there. So, it became a habit. Late night meetups, a text, a knock at my door, Alex leaning against the frame like he'd been there all along. Some nights we grabbed takeout and ate on my tiny balcony, legs stretched out, shoulders brushing in the dark. Other times he drove, no destination, just miles of open road, the city slipping past in streaks of light, music humming low from the speakers. One thing that never changed, no matter where we were, no matter how the night started, we always ended up making out. Pressed up against my doorframe, in the front seat of his car, engine humming beneath us. Against the cold brick of an alleyway, hands gripping, mouths desperate. Every touch, every stolen breath left me feeling more alive than I had in years. But it wasn't enough. Because when those kisses ended, when the heat faded, there was still a hollow space between us. A gap I could never quite close. Whenever I tried to pull him in, to get something real beneath the teasing and easy charm, he pulled away first. always keeping just enough distance. And maybe I should have taken the hint. Maybe I should have let myself believe that this was all it ever would be. But then, one night, something shifted. Alex walked close, hands tucked into his jacket pocket, shoulders slightly hunched against the chill. He was quieter than usual. Not teasing, not smirking, just thoughtful. I nudged him lightly. "You good?" "Yeah, just thinking." "That's a first," I teased, hoping to break whatever was weighing on him. He smirked but didn't bite back. Instead, he kicked a loose pebble on the pavement and muttered, "When I was a kid, I wanted to be a pilot." I blinked. That was the last thing I expected. "A pilot?" "Yeah." His lips quirked, almost self-deprecating. "I had this book. One of those kids' books with big, colorful pictures. And I read it over and over. I told my dad once that I wanted to fly." I already knew where this was going. Let me guess, he shot it down? More like laughed in my face. A beat of silence stretched between us. "You still think about it?" I asked. His expression was unreadable, but when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. "Sometimes." I didn't know what to say, but something in my chest tightened. This was the most personal thing he had ever told me. So, I bumped my shoulder into his, just lightly. "You'd make a terrible pilot." He finally laughed, shaking his head. Yeah, you don't seem like the type to follow instructions." He shot me a look, something warmer in his gaze. "I follow when it matters." And for the first time, I believed him. As we got close to my apartment, I noticed a black car parked across the street from my building, the same one I'd seen outside the bar once before. I didn't think much of it at first, just another car on a quiet street. But as we climbed the stairs to my apartment, something prickled at the back of my neck, and when I woke up in the morning, it was still there. The first time I called Alex instead of waiting for him to show up, I wasn't sure he'd answer. It rang far too long, and when his voice finally came through, something about it was off, hesitant, guarded. "You never call," he said, like he was waiting for a reason, a warning. "I wanted to see you." A pause, then a quiet sigh. "Yeah, okay. I'll be there soon." That night, he stayed over. For the first time, I fell asleep with Alex still in my bed, his warmth solid beside me. It felt real in a way that made my chest ache, and then, the next morning, he was gone. No text, no explanation, just a note left on my nightstand, scrawled in his sharp, slanted handwriting. Had to go. I did nothing but ask questions after that, which he clearly didn't like, and that's when he stopped showing up for a few days. I told myself not to read into it, to not care about the silence, but I couldn't stop thinking about the black car I'd seen parked across the street, the way Alex always pulled away when I tried to get closer, the note, the annoying feeling that I was missing something big, something just out of reach. Then, one day, he appeared. Not with a text or a knock at my door this time. I found him at the bar, like before, like nothing had changed, but it had. Alex was different, distracted, on edge. His eyes darted to the entrance, to the back corners, like he was expecting something big. "Hey there," I said, sliding onto the stool beside him. "Didn't know you were alive." His mouth twitched like he wanted to smile, but it never quite made it. "Yeah, sorry about that. I had to travel, and work is a pain." That was all. No real explanation, just an easy lie that settled between us, heavy and unspoken. I wanted to push, to ask why he left that morning. Why did he always leave? But before I could, something pulled his attention and Alex moved before I could say a word, slipping past me, out the door. Something in my gut twisted. I waited 5 seconds, then I followed him from the other side, like I was leaving the place. And I saw him in the same alley from that time. A man stood there, half-shadowed, a sleek car idling behind him. The alley was dim, the air thick with city heat and the lingering scent of cigarettes. "You know what needs to be done," the man murmured. His voice was low but firm. "Your father expects results." Alex said nothing, and the man sighed. "You've been distracted. Handle it, or someone else will." One pause, then something passed between them. A small, dark shape, barely visible in the dim light. A gun. Again. Alex turned slightly, slipping the weapon into his jacket, and then he saw me. For a moment neither of us moved, but he tilted his head, and I felt all my intuitions telling me to back out. So I hid in the shadows away from whatever the hell this was until the car left. I took a deep breath and stepped in. Jesus Christ. Ben. No. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Don't. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. For the first time, he looked tired, worn in a way I'd never seen him. You want to know the truth? He let out a short, humorous laugh. I'm not just some bartender. Oh, don't tell me, I laughed ironically, like I'm dumb enough to not have figured that out yet. What I didn't know was how bad it really was. My family. He hesitated, but he wasn't aware there was no turning back. It's not a family. It's an empire. The pieces clicked together. The men in suits watching him, the black car outside my apartment, the way he always pulled away first, like he knew he shouldn't be getting close. No, I muttered, pressing a hand to my forehead. You're... Mafia. He finished. Yeah. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me, like I'd fallen into something too deep to climb out of. And what was that? I nodded toward his jacket, toward the weight I knew was now resting inside it. What must be dealt with? His jaw tightened. Nothing you need to worry about. I laughed, but it came out wrong, sharp and venomous. You think that's gonna work? His hands curled into fists. I never wanted you to find out like this. Like this? I yelled. Like you were ever going to let me find out at all? Silence. I dragged a hand through my hair, turning away. I swear, what we have is real, he said. His tone was almost desperate. I shook my head, stepping back again. You don't get to say that. Not after lying to me this whole time. His jaw clenched. I didn't lie, He cut himself off, like he knew how shallow that sounded. I needed space, distance, anything to make the weight in my chest feel less suffocating. Ben, please, believe me, he said, quieter now. I tried so hard to be with you, but I had to protect you. A heavy sigh. I never wanted to drag you into this. I squeezed my eyes shut and my heart pounded too loud in my ears as I left the alley. I wasn't sure if I could believe him, but the worst part? I kept wanting him. I wasn't expecting to see him so soon, not after the alley, not after the truth burned between us like an open wound, but there he was, standing in the doorway of my apartment, just like he'd been 1,000 times before, hands in his pockets, head bowed slightly. I stopped before I could even think about walking past him. I should have kept moving, should have ignored the ache that spread through my chest at the sight of him, but instead, I found myself facing him, fighting to keep the frustration out of my voice. You shouldn't be here, I muttered. Alex exhaled, a breath that was almost a sigh. Yeah, I know. The silence between us stretched on like an impossible distance, neither of us moving. Finally, he spoke, soft and hesitant. I meant what I said, Ben. I didn't want you in this. I scoffed, the bitterness biting at my tongue. Yeah, well, it's too late. His eyes flicked up to meet mine, then the weight of what we'd both said hung in the air. He swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. Something in his expression cracked. It was like he couldn't hold it together anymore. You were never just a fling, he admitted, his voice raw with something I didn't want to name. Not to me. I hated how much I wanted to believe him, but I told him to leave before I could get any more hurt. And yet, that night wasn't done with all its surprises. It was past midnight when I heard a knock on my door, and I didn't even have to be a genie lamp to guess who was there. I should have just shut the door, should have told him I was done. Instead, I stepped aside. Alex walked in without a word, running a hand through his hair, tension bleeding from his every movement. Ben. His voice was rough, like he was already bracing for another fight. I sighed, rubbing my temple. I don't want another lie, Alex. His jaw tightened. I know. Silence stretched between us. Then, with something almost hesitant, Alex sat on the edge of my couch. He looked out the window for a while before saying, I wish I'd met you another way, he muttered. That made me pause, I wasn't as mad as earlier, so I decided I could at least listen. What do you mean? He exhaled slowly. If things were different, if I wasn't... He stopped himself, jaw clenching like the words tasted bitter. I sat beside him, close, but not touching, not yet. You can want more, you know. My voice was softer than I expected. You don't have to be just Mafia's son. You don't have to let your dad control you. A dry laugh escaped him. It's not that easy. I know. His fingers twitched, like he wanted to reach for me, but didn't. I did it for him. I placed my hand over his, grounding him. No teasing, no accusations, just an anchor. Alex finally looked at me, something unspoken flickering behind his eyes. And this time, he didn't pull away. I lingered at that moment, knowing it might be the last one we'd share. Time passed. I didn't see Alex after that night, but he never really disappeared. His texts came at odd hours, always in an enigmatic way. Stay home tonight. Don't go to the bar for a while. I'm protecting you. Protecting me from what? From who? From him? I had nothing else to do with that story at all. He should leave me the hell alone if he wanted so much to help me. On the opposite side, my heart wanted to believe in something else, that there was a reason behind his distance. But the longer the days stretched, the more I felt like a ghost moving through my own life. I was haunted by the memory of his touch, the heat of his breath against my skin, the way his voice dipped when he let his guard down. Even knowing what I knew now, even after everything, I still yearned for him. And maybe that was the worst part. That night, I had just stepped into my apartment, the familiar creak of the door barely registering in my mind, when I felt it, the presence of someone else. The air was different, heavy. A split second later, a hand grabbed me from behind. A cloth was pressed against my face, the sharp chemical scent overwhelming my senses. My vision blurred, darkness creeping in at the edges. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not blood, not sweat, but something clean and expensive, like polished wood and cologne that was too sharp, too refined. My head pounded as I forced my eyes open. A chandelier swayed above me, glass catching the dim light, fracturing it across the ceiling. I was set on something soft, too soft. A leather couch, deep and sprawling. Not my apartment, not anywhere I recognized. Panic clawed up my throat as I pushed myself upright, my arms shaking under my weight. My wrists were tied, and the ache in my body told me I hadn't come here willingly. "He's awake," a voice said. I turned and my stomach twisted. A man stood before me, sharp suit, silver at his temples. Eyes that reminded me of Alex's, but without warmth, without hesitation. It was his father. He studied me with the same disinterest as someone might give a bug crawling across their pristine floor. He held my chin with a tight grip that scared me.
"You're a problem, Benjamin. My son is too sentimental."
I pulled at the restraints, but before I could move further, pain exploded across my face, my head snapping to the side. The taste of blood flooded my mouth. I breathed through it, working my jaw, my vision swimming as I slowly turned back to him.
"You're either part of this world,"
he said, his tone almost bored,
"or you're a liability, and you, my dear, are a big pain in my ass."
I let out a short, breathless laugh, spitting blood onto the pristine floor. "You should have killed me then." The doors burst open. Alex stormed in, fury crackling off him like a live wire. His gun was drawn, the barrel already lifting. "You said you wouldn't touch him, Victor," he yelled. My eyes shone with unshed tears. His father didn't flinch. He barely even blinked.
"So dramatic,"
he muttered.
"I thought I raised you better."
"Let him go," Alex bit out. "Now." He sighed like he was bored.
"I shouldn't have let you play that long with this one."
I swallowed hard. My throat was dry. "You're wasting your time," I said, voice rough. "I don't know anything. I don't care about any of this." Victor let out a soft, cold laugh. "This wasn't necessary," Alex interrupted as his dad opened his mouth to retort to me. He had a neutral expression, but his fists were clenched. Victor didn't look at him.
You made it necessary.
I've done all you wanted. Something unsaid passed between them, a battle that neither of them needed to be voiced. Alex exhaled sharply and turned to me, his jaw tightening. "Come on," he said, voice low. "Let's go." I didn't move at first, even though I should have. Victor watched me like he was waiting for something, a crack, a sign of weakness. "Ben?" Alex's voice was softer this time, and that took me out of my trance. I forced myself to stand, ignoring the way my legs threatened to buckle. But just as Alex moved to grab my arm, something shifted. A sound, low and distant at first, then closer. Too close. Gunfire. It cracked through the air like a whip. Shouting erupted in the hallway beyond the doors. Victor sighed, setting his glass down with deliberate ease.
So predictable.
Then everything broke. The doors slammed open again. Men in black, weapons drawn, shouting orders. Victor's men reacted instantly, returning fire as the room turned into a battlefield. Glass shattered, wood splintered, smoke and gunfire thickened the air. Alex was on me in an instant, untying my wrists with one hand while holding his gun in the other. "Stay low," he ordered, dragging me behind an overturned table. "We need to move, now." I couldn't breathe. My pulse was a wild drumbeat in my ear. "Who?" I started, but another round of gunfire cut me off. "Rivals," Alex said, voice clipped, scanning the room. "They've been circling for months." Something in his expression told me that this was worse than usual. A body fell near us, blood seeping into the marble, and Alex grabbed my face, forcing me to look at him. "You need to trust me, Ben." I wanted to scream at him, ask him why I should, why he had dragged me into this. Why did he make me love him only to be obligated to be cast out like this? Instead, I had barely nodded before he was pulling me through the chaos, ducking as bullets ripped through the walls around us. He fired back without hesitation, each shot precise and controlled. We made it into the hallway, but the gunfire was relentless. Shadows moved around us, some Victor's men, some the enemy. "Let's go this way," he said, but before I could respond, I felt a sharp, searing pain. I stumbled, legs giving out, my back slamming into the wall as my breath caught. Alex turned, his face twisting in horror as he caught me before I hit the ground. "No, no, 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 no!" His hands pressed against my side, warm and slick with blood. My blood. I tried to speak, but the words got lost somewhere between my throat and the thick haze settling over me. "Stay with me," Alex demanded, voice breaking. "I swear to God, Ben, stay with me." The edges of my vision blurred. The distant sounds of gunfire faded into something hollow, distant, and then darkness. My body felt like it had been ripped apart and stitched back together with fire. Pain pulsed through every nerve as I fought to stay conscious. My breath shallow, my ribs aching with every inhale. The sheets beneath me were too soft, the air too rich with cedar wood and expensive cologne. Not my apartment, not a hospital, not safe. I tried to move, but a firm hand pressed against my shoulder. "Don't." The voice was rough, strained, familiar. I forced my eyes open. Light stabbed through my skull, and for a moment, the world blurred until I saw him. Alex. He sat beside the bed, sleeves rolled up, dried blood staining his cuffs. His usual pristine suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled, his expression unreadable. His hands twitched like he wanted to reach for me but didn't know if he should. "You're finally awake," he murmured. My throat was raw, but I forced it out. "Where?" "My place." His voice was tight. "You're safe." A weak, bitter laugh escaped from my throat. "Safe?" My head fell back against the pillows. "Right, because that worked so well." Alex flinched. Silence stretched between us, thick with everything we weren't saying. I was too tired to fight, too tired to keep up with the endless game of push and pull we'd been playing since the moment I met him. But the anger was still there, raw and simmering beneath the pain. "You lied to me." My voice was hoarse but steady. "You said you were protecting me. All this time, you were just waiting for me to become collateral damage." Alex's face twisted, something breaking behind his eyes. "That's not true." "No? Then what the hell do you call this?" I swallowed hard. "You should have left me." I said, bitter. Or better, you should have never kissed me in the first place. His jaw clenched. Don't say that. I turned my head, meeting his eyes. I don't belong in your world, Alex. My voice was hoarse but steady. I never did. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. You think I don't know that? His laugh was low, humorless. You think I haven't spent every second trying to keep you out of this? Something twisted in my chest, deeper than the pain, more familiar than fear. Then why? Because I love you. The words landed like a punch, took my breath away. Alex's hands curled into my sheets. Ben, no matter how much I push you away, I can't stop wanting you. His voice was raw, something cracked open inside him. I can live without money, without power, without this goddamn name. His eyes locked onto mine, burning. But I can't live without you. A beat of silence. You're the only thing in my life that's real, he said barely above a whisper. I closed my eyes. That wasn't fair. My fingers twitched, aching to reach for him. Then the door opened. Victor. He stepped in like he owned the air in the room, his expression unreadable, his presence suffocating. His gaze flicked to me, unimpressed, before settling on Alex.
So your pet is safe and sound,
he mocked, then continued.
That was a mess.
Alex straightened, back rigid. I told you I'm done. Victor arched a brow, and his lips curled slightly, something that wasn't quite a smirk.
Oh, so you really meant that? No more, Dad. No more of this. I did everything you wanted, played by your rules, but I'm done. You won't take him away from me.
Victor tilted his head, watching him like a chess piece that had suddenly refused to move. I was still tense from head to toe, no matter how much the wound stung.
And what do you think that means, Alex?
Alex didn't waver. I don't care how hard it is. Victor tilted his head, considering.
As if this is something you can walk away from.
I never asked for anything, Father. Victor sighed, almost pitiful.
You sound just like your mother.
I felt the shift, saw something flicker across his face before he shut it down, his expression smoothing into cold defiance. Then I guess she was the only one in this family with any damn sense, Alex said, voice low. Victor's jaw ticked, but his sharp eyes never faded.
If you leave, you'll always be under our shadow, you know that.
Alex exhaled through his nose. I know. Victor's gaze flicked to me, assessing.
And yet you still think you can keep him safe?
I can. Victor studied him, then finally nodded.
Then I'll make this simple.
He stepped closer, his presence pressing down on the room.
Walk away. But if you ever interfere, there will be no second chances.
A pause. Alex nodded once. Understood. Victor lingered a moment longer, then turned to me.
Welcome to the family, boy.
The door clicked shut behind him, but his weight remained. I exhaled. That's it? Alex dragged a hand down his face, his shoulders slumping. That's it. I frowned. You're actually serious? You'll do that just to stay with me? I argued. Alex sat beside me again, reaching out hesitantly before gripping my hand, firm and grounding. I love you, and if you want me back after all this, I'll fight whatever I need to do. The wound in my heart ached. It was inevitable. I loved him just as much, and that should be worth something. I do. He chuckled softly. Why does this sound like I just proposed to you? He asked, still laughing. You basically did. That's true, he confirmed before sealing our lips in a tender touch. Our future was uncertain, but we were finally together. I left my job, my apartment, the quiet life I once clung to, and moved in with Alex. 6 months later, the bar was steady, the work was mindless, and Alex is still there. He watched me wipe down the counter, a smirk tugging at his lips. You actually look happy. I rolled my eyes. Don't get used to it. He laughed, easy and real, like the past doesn't weigh on us. Like there aren't men slipping in and out of the back room, a reminder that no matter how far Alex tries to step away, the world he left still breathes down on our necks. There would always be eyes watching, ghosts lurking just out of sight. A reminder, a warning. But we chose love over legacy. Peace over bloodshed. I squeeze his hand once before letting go. Come on, last round's on you. He huffs a laugh, shaking his head.
I'm the owner, Ben.
Yeah, and I'm your favorite bartender. And that was all I needed. A reminder that Alex would also always choose me. If you could see one scene from Alex's point of view, which would it be? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.